There are a few moments in Baldurs Gate 3 that leave us just knowing there's more to the story. These mysteries either take a lot of effort to get to, or require specific decisions in a specific order to discover. When you finally get to the so-called end of these scenarios, the reward either doesn't add up, or the narrative ends without a real conclusion. Sure, some of these may be poor game design or the remnants of content that has been cut from the game, leaving a ragged hole. But this is Larian. They are perfectionists. It's far more likely that these mysteries are yet to be solved. This is the one I'm certain of, a real unsolved mystery. If there is something left in the game still to find, this is it, Cazador's basement. In Cazador's palace, there is a whole area through a hatch that is hidden under a locked chest, in a secret room that you can only access by pushing a button in another room that locks you in. And the key for this hatch is hidden in another secret chest in the attic. Once in the secret area, the basement, the puzzle begins. The first room is filled with metal boxes and 2 pressure plates that, upon both being pushed, causes the door to unlock and open. The second room looks like more of the same, only this time it's 4 pressure plates and they are surrounded by concealed traps. There is poisonous, flammable gas from the ground and fireballs shot from the mouths of gargoyles. When placing the metal crates, the back 2 set off the fireballs, and pushing more than 1 plate at a time will release the gas, causing the whole area to become toxic and then explode. Once all 4 plates are pushed, the next door activates to unlock and open. The first door closes and locks behind you. The final room is circular, with cages dangling in the open centre. On the far side is a chest with 2 more pressure plates either side, booby-trapped with a vent and 2 more spitting gargoyle heads. Pushing either pad sets off the trap, and both pads at the same time stops them and unlocks the chest. After all of this, you will find some elixirs, some gold, and Dawson Kiltmaker's confession. This is the letdown. Everywhere I looked, the one thing in common people had to say about this was that the reward was extremely underwhelming for how well hidden this area was, plus the effort of the trap puzzle. So what's the big mystery? Something doesn't sit right with me. Many people who looked at this after patch 5 agree. Before patch 5, the final room was different. There were levers on either side of the room, one of which had the lever arm broken off of the mechanism, with no way to fix it, and the ability to jump in the hole and throw things in the hole. Baz Gaming spent hours throwing metal crates down onto the top of the cages in an attempt to explore the underneath, finding nothing of value. Groups of people found in forums and comment sections played with different combinations of the pressure plates being pushed to no avail. People were spending so many hours in this one section of the game that Larian had to step in and fix it. After patch 5, the levers were gone. The hole in the middle was no longer accessible in any way, leading people to believe that this means once you find the chest, that's it. Well, I went to look for myself, and although the chest was heavily underwhelming for everything that leads up to it, I started to accept that there was no more to this puzzle, until... When you open the chest, you get the sound effect and visual indicator of a button being pushed. This wasn't in the previous design. The chest wasn't locked and there was no click when you opened it. The chest itself is not movable, unlike pretty much every other chest. This chest is a button. I went forum diving again to see if anyone was still looking after patch 5, and I haven't found a single person talking about the click. There were discussions centered around the one cage that's at the front of the hole as you enter, as it's targetable. People were trying everything they could think of on it, trying to put dead people in the cage, throwing things at it, and using spells. Finding that when the spell Ray of Frost was applied to the cage, it glowed red. This is all encouraged by Dawson Kiltmaker's confession that reads, "As a child, I was often coldly cruel to small animals, though I kept such abuse well hidden," linking the ice spell to the book. The next statement read, "I teased my young sister Farah unmercifully about her weight and skin blemishes, which led them to think of the spell Vicious Mockery. And finally, I feared that I lacked the skills to pass." People on the forum thought spells such as Guidance could be linked here. I call this a rabbit hole because other inanimate objects glow red when hit with ice debuff, the last one turn. Things such as lights, some doors and elevators. But that click, no one was talking about it. Looking more deeply in the area, you can see mechanical parts resting against the walls, and in between the cage doors and the outer wall of the main room, there are clearly cogs and teeth that look like they would raise or lower something. There is one more thing in Cazador's abode that seems like it could be linked to activating the puzzle. In the main chamber of Cazador's dungeon, where the boss fight takes place, if you loop back around underneath the entrance, you will find an area with some burned goblins in a pit. There is a pressure pad on the floor, which seemingly does nothing. I have been trying many things with all the pressure pads, using the action of opening the chest as the moment to check if the changes I made might be correct, as you can't hold the chest open when switching to another player, but I have yet to discover anything new. But I am convinced there is more to this area, even though others have given up many months ago. The second mystery comes from the brain jars on the Nautiloid. Right after you start the game, there are 2 jars to be found and 2 cultists that are strapped into the machine, with the narrator saying,
"Man isn't dead, but he's totally unresponsive."
If these brains came from these people, that means that they came from members of the Cult of the Absolute. You then end up holding onto these brains all the way through to Act 2, where you head southwest of the necrotic laboratory region in the Mind Flayer colony and find the Mine Archive interface. This Mind Flayer biotechnology allows you to talk to the brains in the jars with the use of the slack-skinned head. The True Mind, Willing Mind, Butchered Mind, Closed Mind and Fresh Mind brain jars found around the colony will only give you basic dialogue. The Waking Mind, found behind the brain mapping puzzle on the other hand, can grant the permanent buff Githzerai Mind Barrier. But what about the other 2 brain jars you held all this way? The Slave Mind brain from the Nautiloid is just very generic dialogue about the worm being inside its head.
They're in my head. They're in yours too. It won't be long now until we're changed.
Whereas the Dark Mind has a little bit more to it.
My darling Carolina, how I'd love to wine and dine ya, but you chose my foolish brother over me.
This brain sings a twisted song about a love lost to a brother, with no explanation, just a name, Carolina. I've looked in all 3 acts, but I cannot find her. Why did we carry this brain so far? And why did Larian add a song about Carolina to the game? We might never know. The survival skill is pretty limited in use. It can occasionally be used in dialogue options, but its main use is to detect hidden buried treasure. All around Eltergard, in corners, in crevices, and even right on pathways, you can find buried treasure chests. These are the large types of chests, not exactly simple to bury, and considering they're supposed to be hidden, digging a huge hole in the middle of a pathway isn't exactly the best place to try and hide something. These chests can sometimes have some interesting items in, a potion or 2, but some just have a few gold and a rotten piece of cheese. Hardly a stash that needs a full chest, or items that would be important enough to hide. So the mystery of Eltergard is who went around burying hundreds of chests in the most random of places for you to find later. The Iron Flask is found in a chest in Act 1 that is part of the questline Missing Shipment. The caravan transporting it was stopped and attacked by gnolls, and was headed for the secret Zehentrium hideout under Joachim's Rest. The flask was being transported by the Zehentriums for the postmaster of Sword Coast Couriers, Danzo, who intended to deliver it to Frostwell Van Tampa as per the Post House Delivery Complaints Book. Frostwell is the eldest son of Duke Falamra Van Tampa, whose family secret is that she worshipped the devils of the 9 hells. The Iron Flask has the ability to capture a creature within it by use of a special word. Contained in the flask is a spectre, a lesser beholder with only 4 tentacles. Once this monster is released, the flask is useless as the player doesn't know the special word to trap it or anything else again. Why did Frostwell need this spectre to be delivered to him? What was it going to be used for? The Van Tampa family live in the upper city in the Van Tampa villa. It may well be that we would have found out why the Spectre was headed there if Larian had chose to include the upper city to the game, and possibly even the special word to make this flask have an extremely valuable use in game, which leads to the biggest mystery of all. It has been confirmed that the upper city had been planned and work put into the development of this location, as well as data miners finding storylines and voiceovers for various characters in this area. Sven Vincke said that the Upper City was always intended to be just the ending area. The reason any content wasn't included in the final release was planned and intentional, and purely for the reasons to make the game fun to play. But that makes you wonder how Karlach's story was missing its ending, and how so much of the story pointed towards the Upper City to be resolved. When Sven spoke at the Game Developer Conference, GDC, he told us that Larian Studios had decided against creating any DLC, expansions or sequels for the acclaimed RPG, despite its success. Mentioning that although they started looking at a DLC and even contemplating Baldurs Gate 4, they ultimately felt that it was the right decision for the studio.
We want to do big new things. We don't want to rehash the thing that we've done already. So that's when we said, we're not going to do that.
What makes the studio decide that the area was so unfun that it would be better to drop this content and break the storylines that have been pointing to the Upper City across 3 acts?